My name is Tammy Lee Anderson. I've always been connected to God or Source or Universe, whatever you call, since I was little. I've had precognitive ability all my life, and I've considered it kind of an unfortunate ability because I would see things before they happen, but was nothing I can do to change it. I saw my brother was going to pass. I didn't know how it was going to happen, but I knew it was before it happened. And it's all tied in with my near-death experiences as a child. I was stillborn. The umbilical cord was wrapped around my neck. My mother was in labor for 38 hours. And so they took me into another room, they got me going, and I was put into an incubator, which is a little glass box, for about 6 to 8 weeks. And the interesting thing, my memories of all this, is I could feel the emotions of my parents. I could feel the emotions of the nurses, the doctors, the concern. And I was aware of peace, incredible peace, being in the light. So I remember most of it is sensory and being aware of emotions of everyone around. The second near-death experience was about 6 months old. I had to have a surgery on my head because the fontanelles had closed, so the head couldn't grow, and otherwise I would have died if they hadn't done the surgery. But I was such a small weight that when they gave me the anesthesia, I went out of my body and my heart stopped on them. So they couldn't do the surgery, and they had to work on my heart for quite a while to get me to come back. And I remember this very clearly, that I did not want to come back at that time. I remember wanting to go back into the light. And I have to say that the difference between being in peace and then being brought back into that body with all these bright lights, with the smells of the hospital. I remember the smells. I remember the visuals of the light being abrasive, as opposed to being in the light of God when it's not abrasive at all. It's beautiful. And this, I believe, had a big influence on how my life ended up being somebody who was quite sensitive to so many things. But I didn't remember my near-death experiences until I was 17 years old. I had a healing from a priest who was a friend of mine who was a healer, and he did a healing on me, and I remembered everything at that age, at 17. But before that, my awareness of spirit was always there. It was just this longing to find love and to remember the light. Because as a child, I remember the light, I remember the love. That's what kind of drove me as a child. And I've always been sensitive. I was sensitive to light, I was sensitive to sound, to emotions, people's emotions. I would often had big antennas. I could feel the emotions of people before they even said anything. And so I would lay in my room for hours and listen to classical music. For me, that was a way to connect to God. And I would find God in the spaces in between, in that space, that silent spaces in between the sound. And so I've been a contemplative all my life. And it doesn't mean it was always easy. I had depression, I would say, all my childhood, up until age 23, at my third near-death experience. After that, things shifted big time. But up until I can remember, I feel like I had childhood depression, and this manifested in going interior. But how I found refuge is in my athletics. As far back as I can remember, I would go on spiritual walks, where basically I would just go into the mountains and pray. I would look for God in the nature. But at this one time when I was 23, it happened that I was fasting for over a week and I wasn't drinking enough water. And what happened was, I think I had a heat stroke. And all I can say is I went out of my body. I went into the spirit world. And the first thing I experienced was going into the tunnel that everybody talks about, the light. There was many, many souls, and I could see outlines of figures going towards the light. The love was just beyond anything that you can put into words. And then I saw my grandfather in front of me. He was going towards the light, and I saw his back. And my grandfather was a very quiet man, He didn't say a lot in my life, but I loved him very much. And at that time, he was the first person close to me that had passed. I had known when he passed. I was clear across the country, but I called home and I was upset because I knew that he had passed. I just said, hello. But it's hard to explain because it wasn't just mind to mind. It was through your whole body, through your whole soul. I knew everything about him. He knew everything about me. And there were just no boundaries. It was just like complete knowing. I'm feeling him. And then I asked him, I said, okay, so I've heard a lot about Jesus. Can you tell me about him? The real deal, because, there's a lot of stories, but what's the real Jesus like? And as soon as I said that, Jesus appeared in my awareness. He was right in front of me, and beyond words, the love. And I wish that I could express this. In fact, when I just talk about it, it's just like I just want to go into that love, that light that he was. And so I started going into that love. And then what happened was this light being, I want to say, I'll give it a female feeling because this light presence didn't have a gender, but just for word's sake, I'll say female because the sense was soft. And she pulled me to the side because I was going towards the light. And I just had all these questions. Why is there suffering in the world? People are born into abusive homes, or any question that I had, I was asking very quickly. And I realized as I was asking with my words, that as soon as I asked with my words, then the answer would come into my awareness immediately. And so as I asked the questions faster and faster and faster, soon I realized that we were communicating telepathically without words. And all I had to do was think it. Is there free will? Is there, and what I understood is that everything is perfect, but on a expanded level, not on a human level, because it's hard to understand, but on the bigger picture, everything is perfect. And so as I asked these questions, I just got this download, and I had all this light coming into me, like the little darts of light, different colors, shooting into my body, into my mind, into my heart. And it was just like going through this light coming through it. And each piece of light, it was information, it was knowing, it was understanding. It's like every cell of your body. But I didn't have a body, I was just light. I wasn't aware of having a body at that time. I was aware of just being part of the light. And the experience is more real than real. A dream or a hallucination is very discombobulated. It's disorganized. You might remember parts of it, but it can be very unsettling. This experience is more real than real. It's home, and I remember it like yesterday. The memory of this doesn't go away. It's like I can breathe back into the light anytime I wish. In fact, I live this. I mean, there's not a day when I breathe back into that light. So how I returned to my body, nobody asked me if I wanted to come back. I didn't have a chance to say yes or no. I sure would have said no. I don't want to go back, but nobody asked me. I was just, all of a sudden, I was thrust back into my body. I have to say it's one of the most painful experiences I've ever had, because it was so dense. I was laying on the ground and I felt heavy. I felt sick, and I laid there for at least 3 hours before I even did anything. I was so out of it and not happy to be back. And right after this, I had been with my brother 2 weeks after, and I was talking to my brother about this experience of meeting my grandfather in spirit, and just talking about, I believe there's way more to this than we can even imagine. And my brother just said innocently, because we weren't brought up religious or anything, but my brother just said like a child, I believe in God. And so it's a very good memory to be talking to him right before he passed. As far as the precognitive ability, I've never seen this as a gift. It was mostly a burden because I would see things before they happen and there was nothing I can do about it. And with my brother, that was the case. I saw months before he passed. Every time he turned his back towards me and walked away, I felt like he was going away and not coming back. And it was visceral. I felt it in my gut, like something's wrong. And I would told my mother about this. She was worried because I've had these instances all my life. And she was trying to get him to get rid of the motorcycles. And I didn't know how it was going to happen, but I knew it was going to happen. So that's why I told my mother, but she didn't know how it was going to happen. So it wasn't like something I could stop. The day he passed, he was getting ready to get on his motorcycle, and he didn't have his helmet on. So I said, "Where's your helmet?" Like an older sister. He said, "Okay." So he walks back in the house, he puts his helmet on, and he had the visor up, and he says, "Goodbye, I love you." And it was like somebody punched me in the stomach. I couldn't say anything to him. I just stood there like in a daze. And it's so hard to explain this feeling because it's an overwhelming feeling of something I can't change. But it's like I'm stepping out of time into a space of feeling things happen, feeling that he's going away, and knowing this is happening and I can't change it. And so he rode over to a friend's house on his motorcycle. I went over with my parents in the car, and my dad was talking to my brother, and I just was watching my brother, my dad, and his friend and his dad in the driveway. This young man, my brother's friend, had given him a Porsche for his 16th birthday. So my brother and his friend were going to go for a ride in the mountains, and that's how he passed. They couldn't control the car. It spun out of control, and he died instantly. The police had called that evening, and as soon as the phone rang, I just said, "Ron's dead." It came out of me, but I shouldn't have said anything because it put my parents into a panic. Why would you even say such a thing? And in hindsight, you don't tell people stuff before it happens because, it just makes things worse. But a few days after, he appeared on my porch, my brother, in full form, like he was in a body. He was standing on my porch, and as open as I am to all this, it was such the stress of this event and seeing him there, I just couldn't deal with it. The emotions were just too much. And I said, I can't do this right now. And so he left immediately, and he came to me that night, as I was sleeping. And this is more than a dream. It was an experience of him. He came to me laughing, because I'm a philosopher at heart, and I love to imagine things about life. I'm very curious. And he said, "Well, you're right about one thing. There's more to it than what appears to be." And so every time I think that I might know something, then I realize that there's way more than we can imagine. The thing is, we can't fit all this into a little brain, a little mind. The scientific mind wants to understand, wants to study near-death experiences, wants to figure it all out, wants to prove it. You cannot put this experience in a box. But the preponderance of the evidence is so many people are expressing their experiences now. It's without a doubt that people are coming back with similar experiences of the light, of communications with loved ones. But it's an experience. It's kind of like you try to tell somebody what it's like to travel to Europe. You can read about traveling to Europe, but until you've gone there, I wouldn't know what France is like if I haven't been in France. I could have read about it, and I could tell you all about it. I could tell you about the history. But until you've been there, you don't know the sights, the smells, the experience. It's not an intellectual thing. And the same with the spirit world. Until you experience it, which we all will, you can only imagine it through other people's experience as best you can. So one of the reasons why I'm sharing this story is because I think that there's a need for people to understand that there is more. At least for myself, I feel that a big part of who I am is in spirit already, and that there's just an aspect of who I am that is experiencing this experience now as a human. All of me is not here. An aspect of God is experienced in God's self as a human being, experienced with a name called Tammy Lee Anderson, or, with the name Anthony, with a life story. And so the aspect of who we are, which is God, in almost like a fractal pattern, is experiencing the human being experience for a short time. And we're born into a lineage, in a sense, with history of generations and stories. We're born into a story and a program, basically. Aspect of God gets to live it out in a unique way, because every person's experience, every soul's experience is a different twist on the experience of life, the experience of learning to love in challenging situations. It's a challenging to be in human form. But when we talk about Jesus, the death and resurrection, I believe that everyone is that death and resurrection. The most amazing thing that I find about humans is they can experience some of the most difficult things in this world, and they can show such beauty in rising up out of the suffering. I mean, I've worked with the homeless. I've worked as a chaplain in a hospital, and the power of the human spirit is phenomenal. And it's that aspect of God that arises within them in the moments when it's not hardly bearable, but love rises through it. And so we do experience challenges in this life. I was in a car accident in 2019. It wasn't that bad of an accident, but my head was turned such a way that it messed up my neck. And the surgeon said that I was one step from a wheelchair. I would be a quadriplegic. If I'm even, anything, if I got bumped one more time, if I got in a car accident, I would be a quadriplegic. So I've been living with that. But the pain some nights was so challenging that I would be up all night pacing back and forth because the nerve pain would be going through my spine into my feet. And the amount of pain was beyond anything that I've experienced. And what I learned from this was really amazing. When you watch the pain, you notice that it changes. It never stays the same. And so one of the magnifications I feel when it comes to suffering rather than pain is a reality of this life. It happens. But suffering happens when you offer resistance, when you think that it will never stop. This is going to continue forever. What I learned was I would watch the pain, I would observe it from outside my body in a sense. I was very much in my body on one aspect because I felt all of it. But if you can step back and not resist it and observe it with curiosity, what I noticed is it would shift and change. And in those times when it shifted to a not so bad, I could take a breath. We have the capability to heal. I believe all healing is self-healing. And I experienced this with this injury. I was told by the neurosurgeon just recently that he's never seen anything like this. He expected from this injury that he'd be doing surgery, but he looked at the scans and said, it's completely healed now. There is no sign of an injury there anymore. And he wanted to know what I did, how I did this, because he wanted to share it with his patients. And I just said, it's the light. And it's something that we can all tap into because that's who we really are. And so if we tap into that aspect of the light, miracles happen every day. And we're part of that miracle. It's not just for a certain few, it's for all of us if we actually realize who we are in the moment, which is much more than we can imagine. These are questions that are a bit challenging to answer because everybody's experience in this life is unique. The potential is there, but as far as healing goes, when I was 17, I met a priest who was a healer, and I saw healing of thousands of people. Now, not everyone received healing as they expected or wanted. Maybe they got the healing of being able to accept that they were going to pass at a certain time with a little bit more peace. But pain is a reality of this life. I mean, it's part of the game in a sense. We're here to have a human being experience with limitations. Love is tried in a sense through the challenges of this life, and we're adding to all of it by our experience. And it's important to realize that what you focus on, that's what you're going to experience. So if I focus on, as a kid, if I want a red bicycle, if I focus on that bicycle, I talk about that bicycle, I tell my parents, I want this for Christmas, it's just, talk. My brother was really good at this. His focus would be on this, and that's what he experienced. What you focus on is what you experience. Now, in this reality, it often happens much slower. In the spirit world, it happens immediately. As soon as you think of something, it manifests. In this life, it's a lot slower, but it does manifest. And so the power of the mind is much more than we can even imagine. We often think that our life is a result of other people, but 5 people can be looking at the same event and experience it totally different. And so it's what your perception is, how you're perceiving it, what you're focusing on. I can look at this garden and I can focus on the light sparkling on the water. I can focus on the bird. I can focus on the trees, the light coming through the trees. Someone else can focus on, hearing the cars outside, and their experience is totally different. So no two persons' experience is the same because of what they're focusing on, where their attention is. What are you aware of now in this moment? If you're experiencing a lot of pain in your life, where is your focus? I was once told by someone I had the wheel of a Mack truck. A Mack truck is like a really big truck, because when I set my focus on something, that's what manifests eventually. I mean, I worked on 2 master's degrees at the same time. I was on the 5-time national championship team kayaking. I made the Olympic trials in 1980. That takes intention, that takes focus. I'm practicing mediumship now, and that takes focus, that takes attention, that takes getting back up when it doesn't go so well. You get back up again and again, and you put your focus on it. Now, there's a letting go that happens also. We make the intention, we work towards it, but then we let go. And when we surrender, when we let go, miracles happen, because sometimes things happen that we couldn't even imagine in our mind. Sometimes what we want is not the best thing in the scheme of things. Can you imagine if everybody got what they wanted, in the moment? It would be a really strange world. But what I'm saying is, when you focus on something, you make the intention and then you release it, let go, and miracles can happen. Bigger things than you ever imagined. It's not an act of will. It's an act of focus, and it's an act of surrender. Strong intention, and then you let go. It's like, when you're doing a painting or you're doing a piece of art. You set your colors out there, you have an idea, but then you just let go. You let go, and you start going with the art, and something happens, and all of a sudden you say, yeah, that's it. And it's beautiful. It's more than an act of will. It's more than an act of intention. It's attention, and it's that creative curiosity that arises. It's the intuition that arises. And when you make that connection between the head and the heart, and that aspect of you that is the eternal light, then you have the power to move mountains. Not that you'd want to, because why would you want to move a mountain? But you have that potential. In fact, it's perfect where the mountain is, and that's why it's there. So much of our environment is there because it's perfectly perfect. I've always been connected with spirit since I was a child, and so it's nothing different, except that at this time in my life, through the mediumship, I am using this connection to bring hope and to bring love, and to help people understand that this connection is never lost. It just shifts and changes the frequency. It's a frequency change, basically. I shift into communication with the unseen. I'm still learning this in many ways of how to communicate, because a lot of what I experience is telepathic, But to try to put that into words, it's more of feelings, it's knowing. And a lot of the evidence that comes through mediumship, it surprises me afterwards, because I'll get information that the person's not even aware of in the moment, and then they find out later it's true. I had a lady who, her son came in the reading. He had passed as a teenager, and at the end of the reading, I said, I know he passed as a teenager, but he's showing me as a toddler, 2 or 3 years old, and he's holding an Easter basket. So it appears to be Easter time in this photograph. And he's got his finger on his tooth, like this. And the mom, she said, I understood everything in the reading, but I don't understand this because I don't have a photo of him or a memory of this where he's doing this. And I said, I was trying to figure it out for her. I said, did he have something wrong with his tooth? Because he's going like this, and this. And she said, no. And I said, it's okay, just write it down and see what happens. Well, that very day, her daughter came home with some photographs from Aunt so-and-so and said, go through these photographs, pick out the ones you want and return the rest. And she was going through these photographs, and there it was. It was her son, a toddler. He was only about 2 or 3 years old. He was holding an Easter basket, and he had his finger on his tooth like this. So this was evidence enough for her to change in a very deep way because she was suicidal at the time. In fact, her friends started writing me and said that just changed her whole outlook. She knows that her son is still living, just in a different vibration now, just in a different state of being. And it gave her hope. So I see things, I know things as far as the information comes across. I can hear things sometimes I smell things. Often I'll smell like things like cigarette smoke. I usually don't want to tell people what's going to come in the future. I try to stay away from that because it's none of my business. But I had a lady, her grandfather came in and he was persistent. He kept saying this, just tell her about the birds. She's going to see a big flock of blackbirds within 48 hours. And this is going to be a sign of his love. Well, in the spirit world, there is no time. He's seen this already. And so he was giving her this information that she was going to see a big flock of birds fly in front of her, and then it was going to break up, and that was going to be a sign of his love. And she was going to see this within 48 hours. And so I told her, I said, this is what he's saying. She wrote it down, and she said, 24 hours to the minute. She was at a stoplight, and this big flock of blackbirds went right in front of her car, and then broke apart. She couldn't believe it. So that's a validation thing that I couldn't even begin to make up. It's like, it shocks me. The mediumship takes a lot of trust because you have to trust what's coming in and say it, and that can be challenging. But I think it's quite fun when information comes up that you couldn't even imagine. So the information comes in many ways. And more it's coming in ways that I have no idea what it means. I'm just a channel. I'm just giving what's coming through and trying to get myself out of the way. And I feel that the mediumship is similar to the martial arts and Aikido. The word means the way of harmony, the way of love. It's a path of harmonizing with energy, of flowing with energy, of blending with energy, not meeting force with force, but turning and following the energy into a most organized place where two become one and then two again. And I find that mediumship for me is in the same way. It's a blending with the energy, a harmonizing with the energy, and not having an agenda, not being focused on the outcome, but letting the information arise as the person in spirit would like it to be given to their loved one. So as a medium, my job is to stay out of the way. And there really is no place for the ego in this work, because a good reading will transform both the person receiving the information as well as the medium. You're experiencing the love from spirit that's coming through. As an Aikido teacher, I taught at the university for 10 years, self-defense, and I've been doing for over 42 years now. And the basic philosophy of Aikido is there is no form. Eventually, duality is dropped. It's not about a technique, it's about the flow, it's about the blending. And ultimately, Aikido, the practice, is about developing the spirit. This means true victory is victory over yourself. This is a prime idea in Aikido, that it's all about polishing yourself and letting the beauty and the love and the spirit manifest in your practice. It's a beautiful art, and this is how I view mediumship as well. It's a blending, it's a polishing of the spirit. My teacher said something beautiful the other day about a true spiritual teacher is one who is transparent. They allow the light to shine through them. And so it's not about becoming someone, it's not about the ego. It's actually stepping back and letting spirit come through. And you asked about humility, and that is very important with the martial art and in the mediumship, to have a sense of humility and realize that it's not something we're doing, it's just something we're surrendering into, which is love, which is compassion. And both, to me, mediumship and Aikido are the art of peace. It's a state of being, not a state of doing. I use this in healing practice as well, because a big part of my practice is healing. I've been doing healing for many more years than the mediumship. And it's about stepping out of the way, letting it flow through you, and healing happens. But there are many people that have a strong ego in the world today, I think as a result of fear, not knowing who they really are. If you really knew that you were an aspect of the divine light, there would be no place for ego. Ego is a false sense of identity. We need ego in a sense to be able to communicate with each other, because we're playing roles, yeah? So there's an aspect of the ego that's very important, and I don't even want to see this battle between ego and no ego, because it becomes a duality in a sense. But ego seems to be something that's based in fear of not knowing who we really are. It's important to show people something about yourself so you'll be liked. It starts very young. We build up a sense of ego, a sense of autonomy. The practice is finding balance with all of it. The ego is not bad. It just can't be the primary driving force in our life. Ego is necessary, but the primary driving force has to be the spirit, has to be the essence of love, has to be kindness. Otherwise, we live more in a defense, because if we have a big painting of who we think we are and something happens to that, then we can fall into a great despair when it falls apart. And eventually it will fall apart. We're all going to die. We're going to lose everything we invested in. At the end of the day, it's not how many houses you have, not many cars you have, not many friends you have. What really matters is how much love have you shared. And this is why so many people have these life reviews. They see what was really important. It was the smile to somebody that they didn't even realize, I said hello to somebody that needed the hello that day. I, paid for somebody's groceries that didn't have enough money that day. Those are the things that add up in the end, that make our life worth living. It's not the stuff. And ego is built on stuff. It's built on degrees. But what interests me is connection with people, connection with healing, connection with kindness and love, because at the end of the day, that's what it's about. We're going to lose everything we ever had, except love, except kindness, except joy, except peace. This is the stuff that is eternal. Everyone is a true universe. It's interesting because the founder of Aikido said, "I am the universe." That's one of his famous sayings. He had an enlightenment experience. That's how Aikido evolved from combat art into an art of peace. He realized that I am the universe. I am. When I lived in a monastery, after I graduated from my undergraduate degree in theology, I went into the monastery and I lived in a hermitage. And in my hermitage, I had this saying, "Be still and know that I am God." You realize after praying that for many, many, many months and being still with that, being in that you realize that I am. We are I am. I am the universe, experiencing itself as a human being, experiencing times when love is challenged. Can I even love this? Can I even forgive this? Love is tried not by ease and satisfaction, St. John of the Cross. It's often tried by challenges. And that's how the universe, that's how love expands itself. This life gives us an aspect of things we could experience no other way. We stretch love just by coming here. We stretch formlessness into form for a short time. When I was in college, after my brother passed from the car accident, I went into really deep depression. In fact, I didn't want to be here on this planet, and I was finished. I couldn't live one more day, and so I had a bottle of pills. I was on the floor and ready to leave. And what happened was I heard Spirit say, "I love you." And I said, "Leave me alone. Leave me alone." And for an instant, but an instant that was eternal, I was left with the illusion of being alone. I turned away from the light, and in an instant, I was in complete silence, complete dark. I was in the void, and the void is very peaceful, but the void of God, which is hard to put into words, is the potential for everything, but it is a state of before creation. And with one word, I was back into creation, because I didn't want to be there very long. I wanted to be in the act of creation. The act of the universe creating itself in beauty, the trees, the sea, the waterfall, the birds. This act of creation it's life. It's life in motion, life in action, universe expressing itself in all different kinds of shades. We have the potential to create or not. We can go into the silence and be pure potential, go into the void and not create anything. We could end this in a second, but we choose not to, because we're pushing the edges of love, pushing the edges of creation into the most beautiful manifestations that God can imagine. Creation begins first in the imagination of God, and then it becomes a manifestation of God. I wish I could put this into words. We are the universe in all its manifestation. It's not complicated. We try to fit it into our little brains, and it becomes awful complicated. But the simpler we can make it, the better. Just loving each other, practice loving kindness with each other. I'm remembering now another meditation that I did. It's a Vipassana, which you're meditating 10 hours a day for 10 days. At one point in that meditation, I was sitting, and all of a sudden, everything broke up into like particles. That's the best way I can explain it. I was everything in the room. I was everyone in the room. I experienced the building, everything. I was everything. Everything was a part of me, and there was no distinction between me and everything. And then at one point, it was like there was even a sound to it. It was like this humming sound. But then the experience happened when I focused on something, then everything went, and I was right there. So I wonder sometimes if that's what this experience is, that we're everything, we're part of everything, but for a short time, a human time, we're focused on this human experience, and we experience this for a flash. When I was in spirit world in my near-death experience, there was no time, no concept of time. Everything was now. And when we say now, basically that means eternal time. You're in a presence, you're in a time when there's no time. When we think of it in human terms, now means, a minute ago, because I just said now, but in that experience, now is eternal. So now is forever. Now is past, present, future. It's all one experience, but blending together. When I was 7 years old, I remember sitting on the side of my house, and I realized that just being a human being in this world, we cause, inadvertently sometimes we cause pain to another. And so I determined then as a child that I wanted to cause as little pain and as much love as I could in this world. And so my life has always been about how much love can I bring to this world, and it's always been around something around service. And so I started working with the homeless early on. I was a hospital chaplain. I've worked with addictions. I've always been attracted to working with people who had the hardest time in life. So this brought me into all different kinds. I was a youth minister for the Archdiocese of Milwaukee, and working on the Indian reservation in South Dakota. I was a youth minister there as well. And what attracted me to working with the homeless, working with the battered women, I worked as a counselor at a shelter for battered women. It's real. I guess that's the best I could say. It's real. When you meet people, it's kind of like some of the deepest relationships, like of a soldier, are on the battlefield with their buddies next to them. Because they're facing death all the time in battle. And the same when you're working on the streets. People are facing death on a regular basis. It's real. When I've worked in the hospital and worked with people getting ready to pass, it's real what they're going through. Ego falls away at that point. So I think that's what's the aspect of being of service has been very important and has taught me so much about love. So I feel like the future of this world is quite exciting, actually. The potential for the human being is quite amazing, and that's what I focus on. I don't go too much in the future because it's not mine to know, but it's again what we focus on. Focus on love, and no matter how hard things get in this world, always focus back on love, and that's my guiding light. We will go up and down. If we look back in history, there's always been times when we've had rough times. Wars have been part of the human story since the beginning of time. But more and more people are learning that we are all connected. I think the internet is quite amazing, the amount that we can be connected with so many people around the world. I think the internet is just almost like a reflection of the spiritual network, that we're all connected. And I think the more and more we realize that we're all connected and that what we do really does have an effect on others, that's really setting us up for a bright future. The more we realize that our life really does matter here, what we do really does matter, what we say really does matter. And now I've just told you all things about my life, and I just said all of this. Hopefully it matters to somebody maybe that makes sense, that gives them hope. What we do in this world, it does matter. And I believe the future is very bright. It doesn't mean that there won't be hard times that will test us, but that's the challenge that we take on when we enter this world. We're stretching the capacity of love each day that we live on this planet. We're pushing love to the limit. Can I even love this? More and more we're going to realize that we have things in common, that there's a common ground. And we can play our roles. We can take the events that come up and take what's important to us. But at the end of the day, we always have to come back to the foundation, which is the common ground, which is I am the universe. I am one. I am the aspect of God, experiencing God's self within this human dimension. Because all there is really is love. Everything else is an illusion. It's a dance. It's a play. It's a role we're experiencing for a short time. So the future, really, all there is hope and love.